This one, so 2 minutes. All right, let's call this meeting to order. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
I make the motion to approve the agenda for last time.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. No questions regarding the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Consideration of joint work session minutes from October 10th, 2017. Has everybody had a chance to review those? So I'll stand for a motion to approve, or if there's an adjustment that needs to be made.
I didn't see anything wrong with your motion. I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of the October 10th meeting as amended.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no questions, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public comment.
Paula Van Cleve. Am I limited to 3 minutes?
1.5.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask all my questions and y'all can answer them at leisure, okay?
I don't know.
I know.
Do we have a timeline?
City Commission has 3 minutes, so.
Yeah, that's the general rule that we.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
First thing I want to know is all of these new things that you're working on, are they affecting only anything built after February of 2014? Is it pertinent to anything built before 2014, February 2014? That's my first question. And then you have 3 times in here a thing that says it must have its roof supported in conformance with the state building code as modified from time to time. Does that mean every time the state building code is modified, certain structures have to be modified? And I do not remember ingress and egress must be assured by concrete driveway the width of the carport at the work session. I don't remember hearing anything about what the driveway had to be made out of. And I don't see anything wrong with asphalt or maybe even gravel depending on where the carport is, like in the backyard. Then, the assessor's office will tell you that anything that has a roof, you're paying property taxes on. So I don't see a need of a $150 filing fee to go to for the city to file anything anywhere because the county already knows it's there. And I thought we decided there was a lot of stuff that we were going to take the non-conforming out of the wording. The stuff before 2014, more or less grandfather or whatever in the old stuff. And then I have one other question that doesn't have anything to do with carports. Commercial greenhouses provided that any such structure shall not be less than 100 feet from all property lines. Why? Those are my questions. So y'all can answer them now. I mean, that would put, you know, what used to be Blooming Gardens. She had a greenhouse there. She would absolutely have not been in compliance with her greenhouse because she was probably 30 feet from the street. And I'm just wondering why that's been thrown in.
Some lots you can't even get 100 feet.
Exactly. I mean, how big a lot are you going to have to be 100 feet from everywhere? Anyway, that has nothing to do with the carports. But I want to know if this is for the most part everything done after February of 2014, everything before 2014 does not have to, unless they don't have to be in compliance with this unless they're redoing the street, sidewalks have to go in, or utility work has to be done, and they have to give that easement. Clarify. And for sure, someone could say it must have its roof supported in conformance with the state building code as modified from time to time. The state changed their rules, so your carport that was built 6 months ago has to be redone and come into current compliance. The wording needs to be corrected. making it clear that it's new stuff as it changes, or as new stuff come in, that it has to meet current state, has to conform to current state code. All new structures.
Which changes, that's what it's meaning,
Yeah,
which
crystal,
changes
crystal,
from time to time.
crystal.
Okay, the state building
Sure.
codes change from time to time?
Yes,
Okay,
we'll address each one.
all right, that's my question.
We'll do our part.
All right, thank you.
Any other public comments? Yes, sir.
I'm David Stewart. I live at 907 N. We got a letter in our water bill a couple of months ago talking about how the zoning was going to be changed or updated. I'm not sure what the right verbiage is. Anyway, we have a carport, a metal carport that's behind our alley. We're in that curve on N, M&N split, and it's in the back part of that. And from what we understand, we came and talked to her, I believe, and we received a letter about the zoning today that anyway, it would have to be taken down because it's not attached to our house. So I'm kind of like Paula, wondering if that's grandfathered in or not. There's several people I've talked to, and it seems to be everything just south of K. If we were on the north side of K, it would not be the same zone, which is kind of bizarre. Maybe I misunderstood. But anyway, I've talked to several people who have those same type of things in the front yard, and they say, well, if they enact that, all I'm going to do is just put a board or something to connect it, just a wire from my roof to the carport, and then it's connected. So anyway, she advised us to talk to several different people to see if we could get some to come in and talk to y'all about that. So, you know, I believe very strongly that as a citizen that whatever you enact, that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to take my carport down. I put it up out right after that big, when we had that softball size hail, and it protects my vehicle. And but I'm at your discretion or at your mercy, whichever is the better way to do it. So anyway, that's what I was just curious about, because I got the letter and understood that this is the meeting you needed to be at. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Like him, we've got the same kind of carport. We live at 902 West Polk, right there in the corner. And it's not like attached to the house, but it's in front of my driveway. And like him, we use it for protection over our cars. Are we gonna have to take it down, or? We were told about some kind of a date, but I don't remember when we put it up. It's been quite a few years.
We're going to go through today, and if we can get a consensus on this, I think that we'll all have a real good understanding of what came out of the work session.
Okay.
And so I don't have that answer yet because the ordinance isn't complete.
Okay.
So,
Will this be like tonight, or be doing it?
well, we hope to be able to get through everything tonight and come to a consensus.
Okay.
If that happens, then it would go for discussion in front of the commission. If the commission didn't have any changes, then it would go to the commission again for a vote, and this would happen sometime in January. If there's a change at any point in time that goes beyond today, then that may be pushed back a little bit.
Okay.
Now, that's a very rough timeline. James has a presentation that he's going to go through. Hopefully that some of those dates are in there based on what the potential timelines are.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? So we're going to move on to non-action items, which is the discussion of non-conforming structures for land uses. Mr. Williams, you're on the board.
So, what I want to start out with is first, summary of the direction at the our October 10th meeting. So one of the things, or actually there was basically three things that we talked about that was the general consensus from just taking all of our notes and listening to the recordings. So the first thing was to modify the Zone A requirement that requires that carrots.
Carrots?
Hey, I was watching Bugs Bunny at the time, all right? All right, so modify the Zone A requirement that requires carports be attached to a permanent building and also conform to the design and materials which are attached. And I think that would address Mr. Stewart's question. I didn't get your name now.
Corina Leyva.
Ms. Leyva's question as far as do they have to attach to the building? what the recommendation of this body, as well as with the city commission, was that, or the general consensus was, we remove that requirement. In addition to that, we would address the issue of non-conforming structures with a fee, as well as conformance to setbacks. And you have to conform to those, or if you don't conform to those setbacks, in the event that there's any type of infrastructure development, repair, improvement, etc., you would have to bring your structure, non-conforming structure, into setback conformance or have it removed. We also talked about a process for approval. So to discuss, I guess, where we're going, where we are now and where we hopefully will get to eventually is, why is this acting up? Okay, well, that's not going to work. So anyway, process is, for this, is that we would have this discussion today amongst the board members or the commission members. If we did on our agenda place an action item that, should we arrive at some type of a consensus at this point, we would have the ability to take action and push a recommendation of a draft ordinance to the city commission. If that does occur tonight, the draft ordinance will be placed as a discussion item on the next city commission meeting, which I believe is November 27th, as a discussion item only. They would not be able to take action. It doesn't mean that the ordinance is passed, approved, or anything. It's a discussion item. Now, if the commission does agree, they don't see any major changes that are needed or anything like that, we would proceed at the next commission meeting, December 11th, to pass a resolution that would authorize us to advertise the proposed action on the ordinance, meaning that we put it in the newspaper. In addition to that, and this is why we have to be very, very careful, because this will cost money to fix the ordinance. We also have to, with everybody, it's everybody, because this is a change in zoning. It's not just a particular zone, but we have about 4,100 properties. We have to mail a first-class letter to each owner of property within the city limits or in those affected zones. So we've got about 4,100 addresses that we would have to mail this out to. We can't simply just put it in the water bill, because not everybody who receives a water bill actually owns that property. But in addition to that, we can actually print up additional notices that we will, as a courtesy, put it in the water bill. Of course, it would be available online through our website as well. And that's what that resolution would do. In order to allow the appropriate amount of time, we would still have another city commission meeting at the beginning of January, where we could receive public comment on the ordinance, with the final adoption at the very last meeting. And I don't have those dates off the top of my head. Okay, the 22nd. That's if everything goes according to that proposed schedule. Now, a couple of things. If we can't agree on it tonight, it's going to push it to next month before we could even move anything to the first meeting in January for commission. If this body does recommend approval of some type of document, tonight, it goes to the city commission. City commission says, hey, I don't like that. Guess what? It gets kicked back to this body. We don't want to fall into where we mail everything out and then at the last minute, oh, wait, no. We want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity for the appointed officials in here and the elected officials to think about this, also receive public input and comment, because I don't want to waste money on mailing things out and have to start the process over again. So that's where we're at. So talking about the proposed ordinance that was formulated after that joint work session. The first one is section 2.72, which actually establishes the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in this potential draft document that we have here, we actually put in their duties. However, after speaking with the chair this morning and reading that entire section on there, there's a little bit of confusion. So that's where this particular document comes from. These are revised changes where basically it clearly states that this is the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is who's making it up. This is who their authority, what their job is, how they're appointed, the state statutes that actually give them that authority. But primarily, the initial change for this ordinance here is that if you read that 2.72.050, it actually allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve or deny conditional approval for non-conforming structures. The intent behind this is that, you know, we're probably looking at about 100 properties that do not conform due to the setbacks, and we'll get to that here in a minute after the unofficial survey that Crystal had done. So we're looking at about 100 properties, and we don't want to have everything going to City Commission. We want to use this body because they've been empowered to do this. So the City Commission would be utilized as a form of appeal. So in the event that this body, say for instance, somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to have this non-conforming structure authorized, this body says, yeah, that's not going to work, it would then go to the City Commission as an appeal. Or let's say that we do approve it and the neighbor doesn't like it, they still have that appeals process. So that City Commission would be that body for appeals. The second section, that's funny, it got out of order. So anyway, that is exactly what I just talked about. So the second section that we were talking about is section 7.20. All right, section 7.20 addresses the issue of attaching to the permanent structure and the construction material, okay, or the conforming with the design. So what we did was, if you look at the front yard requirements, we cleaned up the language where we actually removed it out of the front yard requirements, attach it to a permanent building. On this particular document, if there's a strike through it, that is the original language in that document. The only new language that's being incorporated in this is the red lettering. So as far as the, to address Ms. Van Cleve's question, the ingress and egress is assured by a concrete driveway, the width of the carport. That language has been in there since 1986, the original language. That is not new language. The only changes that we made were in red, but we did address this in the front yard, the side yard requirement, and also the rear yard. So if this particular language is recommended for approval, to address the issue over on Polk and then Mr. Stewart's question as far as it attaching, no, it would no longer be required to be attached to the house. It wouldn't have to match that design. So would the metal carports be allowed? Yes, it would, as long as it meets other conditions. Now, to move on to the next portion of this, 17.40, this is the longest section. So 17.40 deals with the issue of non-conformance. If you look at 17.40.030, this adds language that if there is a building that's been damaged or destroyed, any means to the extent of more than 50% of its replacement cost at the time of damage or destruction, it shall be restored except in conformity with the most current regulations of this title. Okay, so let's say you had a non-conforming structure and it caught on fire and it burned down, and it's going to cost, you know, the replacement cost on it's $8,000, and but however on that, you know, it's only valued, it hits that 50% value mark. You have to rebuild that structure, and it has to conform to the existing, to the code at that time. So that would mean that, now remember, it's not saying that it has to attach, because we've removed that language. All right, it just means that if you violated setbacks and that thing burns down and it's exceeded that 50% threshold at the time of damage, that means that when you rebuild it, it has to conform with setback requirements. The other thing that we have is you cannot, and this was actually original language in the special use permits, is that basically non-conforming structures, even if you get that approval for non-conformance, you still can't alter, enlarge, modify, remodel, reconstruct, or anything like that. If you do that, you have to bring it into conformance. Also, I'd like to address Ms. Van Cleve's comment about the building code from time to time. It's just like right now, if I build a home to the 2008 building code, all right, that's the code that's in place right now. But then let's say that next year the state adopts a brand new building code. It doesn't affect me until I do some significant alterations to my home. Now, if Patrick chooses to build a home, he would have to comply with that 2017 version. So no, it doesn't mean that.
Okay.
That way, you know, if we were, this is a different way of referencing that. That way we don't have to go to the expense of changing the ordinance every time that the state adopts a new building code. Okay. So, special use permits. This actually existed, and what I'm talking about is in 174050. This language actually already existed in the code. We did make one exception or change to this in red. It's item number 11 under that, is that we have all of these uses listed right now to where the city commission can approve a special use permit. It's use, not necessarily for a non-conforming structure. There's going to be new businesses, new types of uses that come along in the future, and this gives the commission, it expands their ability for different types of uses. So if it's not in there, they have that ability. To address the commercial greenhouse, Blooming Gardens is located in a commercial zone, and so that is allowed. This is if somebody wants to do a commercial greenhouse operation in a single-family dwelling district. That's what that language is for. If they want to erect a hospital or a healthcare clinic in, the best location is going to be, you know, on the south side of Lovington in Zone B. That's not actually an allowed use, but they would be able to apply for that special use permit. Okay, so we also have specific findings. We did include that to give some guidelines, which those guidelines are, it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's not going to have a significant adverse effect on adjacent properties or neighborhoods. No hazard or nuisance. It's not going to create excessive noise, not quality or adverse effect on the environment or attractiveness. It's not contrary to the public interest. Must meet any conditions that the commission imposes. So if they allow this business to go in, we're going to grant you this special use permit. But in order to do this, you have to do this. So they can impose those restrictions. It must be legal, meet state and federal laws, and it's not transferable. So that way, if the permit, or if that special use permit is given to that property and then somebody sells it, if the use changes or if the property changes, that permit doesn't carry over with it. It's very similar to a variance. There is a fee, and before we get on the fee, I'll explain that a little in a couple of slides. So special use permits, they would go through planning and zoning, as in the past. The commission has this person who's applied for this. It goes to the special use permit. It would go to the planning and zoning for a recommendation, and then it would go to the city commission for a final approval. One of the things that we did add in there is that once that is added, they would have to make sure that that permit is displayed in a public area. Especially a lot of these special uses deal with businesses. So moving along, the new content that was added in 1740 is non-conforming structures. So this would apply to structures built or installed prior to February 13th, 2014. Okay, so the reason being is that those structures that were built after that, the odds are that they do have a permit, and if they didn't, it was either a variance because our code enforcement now has that paperwork to prove it. It should have gone through a state building permit process as well. We can also prove the existence of this on that very specific date by looking at Google Earth and the aerial imagery that they have. Not the street view, but the aerial view. So non-conforming structure, you could actually really tell has been altered, modified. They have since updated that map, but you can still use the historical imagery. The structures can remain in place that do not conform so long as it's not a threat to health and safety. There's not a negative impact on economic conditions or quality of life. And C is the structure falls within the setback requirements of the zone. Now, in the event that they don't meet the economic conditions or quality of life or falls within the setbacks, they may apply, or they have to apply, for conditional approval. I know, remember Lauren had asked me earlier, you know, this negative impact on economic conditions or quality of life. Well, who makes that determination? That's what this body does. Yes, you would have this body, if this ordinance gets through, this body would have the ability to approve or deny those permits, and you would need to make those determinations and not just on a whim. I mean, we'd have to have proof of those. You know, setbacks are a little bit easier to judge. So, moving along, the process. In the event that you have this structure that doesn't meet those setbacks, or because that's really what we're addressing here, is non-conforming structures and meeting those setbacks that are there for a reason. We have an individual who would like to do that. Their structure was built after, so they have to apply for this. No, I'm sorry. Let me go back. It applies to structures built prior to, okay? All structures constructed after that, this conditional use does not apply to them. So we have most current version of the city planning and zoning application, as well as non-conforming structure request. It basically gets all that information in one packet that this body would have the opportunity to review. There would be a one-time fee of $150. That is kind of what the consensus was, is it was a one-time fee. It's a filing and processing fee, and let me break this down. I know that we had some confusion. A couple of individuals have said that they had not seen that before, and actually it was discussed, and this is the actual slide pulled from that presentation. You can also find it on our YouTube videos, but it was information on the fee was discussed September 12th as well as October 10th. But we initially had said, yes, it's a $25 filing fee to file this at the courthouse, okay? The reason it's at the courthouse is because that record stays there forever. I know the assessor's office says that if it has a roof, you know, we pay taxes on it. Believe it or not, we all pay property taxes, but the city does not receive too much of that. We receive less than $220,000 a year on property taxes. But we do have to file, we would file that, and it would be attached permanently to that property. That way, in the event that that property is sold or transferred, this document would actually show up during a title search. We did initially think about, well, how much per square foot? But really, we looked at that, and that it would, to the simplest thing that we saw was, what is the actual cost involved with the filing and doing this the way that we've treated variances and stuff like that. So we're looking at a $25 filing fee at the courthouse. We would need to send certified letters to adjacent properties. How we treat variances and any zoning changes, that we send a certified letter to the property owner within 100 feet of the property requesting the change. And on average, that's about 14 properties. Costs us roughly $8 a letter with printing and mailing fees. And then we have about $13 left because we would publish this. We would publish the agenda of this body. We would have staff time to go out and verify, fuel, time, advertising, in addition to the fact that we are recouping some of these costs for changing this particular ordinance. So that's how we arrived at a $150 fee. So the second part of that process is that the request of the non-conforming use approval will be posted in a prominent location on the actual property as well. It would have, in order to apply for it, you have to have that request in sufficient amount of time to where we can mail out those letters and put that and publish 15 days prior to the public hearing. And the public hearing meaning the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We would conduct that public hearing, and at that point, if it's granted, the approval document would be prepared, which basically says that the Planning and Zoning Commission is saying that this structure, even though it does not conform for these reasons, is allowed to remain in place. However, we would have to deal with the setback. We would have this binding agreement in there that at any time that we have to work on those utilities, we have to replace utilities, replace roads, put in sidewalks, and even the franchise holders have to make those modifications. You have to bring that structure into setback conformance, whether you modify it or you tear it down, and that's at the owner's expense. Failure to comply, though, means that approval is revoked. In addition to that, the structure will be removed at the expense of the owner. They would have 15 days to pay it in full. Failure to pay, you would have a lien on the property. Sorry. If it's not granted, They can appeal to the city commission, and also, as I had said earlier, if somebody else doesn't like that, they would have that opportunity to appeal. We do have violation language in there as well, that if you violate it, there are some penalties as far as fines or jail time. But I would stand for any questions that this body may have. I'm going to go ahead and sit down so I can take notes as well. Huh?
You're going to stand for any questions?
I will sit for your questions.
Okay, I'll go first. If the carport meets all the setbacks, but it doesn't conform by looks, but it meets the fact that it's made out of steel and it's viable, holds up, is that gonna be considered conforming?
Okay, yes, but that's if they approve the language to where it removes the requirement that it attaches, which I think that's the direction this body's probably going to go.
Oh, yeah.
But it removes if we remove the requirement that it attaches and has to conform construction, then yes, if it meets the setbacks and it's properly permitted, it's not a problem.
If it's not permitted?
If it's not permitted,
Yeah,
well, this is for
back.
structure. You know, well, no, the thing is, that's why the structures built after the February 2014, the odds of them not having a permit.
I'm talking ones built before 2014.
Yeah, well, no, that's not that. We're going to make the state enforce that particular code. That was a discussion that we had. Is that we're not going to. And I misunderstood. I was thinking new construction. But no, prior construction, no. As long as it meets those setbacks, then no, they would not have to have a approval of nonconformance.
And they would have to get a permit
No.
from the city or anything?
No.
So to be clear, prior to 2014, they do not have to get a permit for nonconformance. And they do not have to change, assuming that this is accepted the way it's written. After 2014,
is when they have to do everything.
They should meet setbacks, because the removing the language as far as it attaching and conforming to the appearance, that's for everything. Irregardless if it was built in 1982, 2012, or 2017.
so prior to 2014, if it doesn't conform to all of what we have in here, they still have to come and apply for nonconformance.
Correct.
Like that. Okay, so what we're requiring for the nonconformance prior to 2014 is that we have the paperwork assigned to the deed title property saying that they have permission to have this structure in nonconformance, so that they can maintain it, or maintain ownership, so that they can keep it. And then at the time of sale or the update of some kind to the city for utilities or street purposes or something, then it has to come back into conformance?
Correct, and I believe I want to make sure that this is perfectly clear. When dealing with a request for nonconformance, the primary issue that we are dealing with is, does it fall within the setbacks? Totally, let's just assume right now that we've eliminated the requirement for attachment and conforming to the construction style. Let's just do it like that. So if they have a structure that they built prior to 2014 and it's 2 foot within the right-of-way, they would be required, because they built it wrong, they would be required to apply for that certificate of the approval of nonconformance. So they would file that paperwork, and if it was granted, that was great. However, if the city comes in and let's say that we have to build sidewalks with that road project, which we're required to do now, we build that, they would have to bring that structure into conformance or tear it down. But let's say if they do have that particular structure that was built prior to 2014, as long as it meets setbacks and all of the other requirements that we have, there's no need for that certificate or the approval of nonconformance.
This is only for those structures that are in violation of our setbacks.
Yes, sir. And I know that the chair had kind of a look on your face when we were talking about 100 structures. When Crystal, and this is speculation, but when Crystal went out and was looking at structures, carports in particular, that were not in conformance with the current zoning code, we had
470.
like it was like 400.
Yeah, 400.
But we're speculating only about 100 of those actually are not in conformance with setbacks. The predominant reason that the carports she had found were not in conformance was because they didn't attach permanently.
Or they weren't in the
Or
line.
they're not
Correct.
mentioned.
So, to follow up on the previous question, I think part of his question was, and if it wasn't, then I'm just going to add it now, is that transferable at sale? That non-conditional, because typically that's not. Like a non-conforming conditional use is not typically transferable.
When you sell a property, does it transfer?
No, it's under a different.
Well, we have a special use permit. That is not transferable, but nowhere in this particular document does it say it's not transferable. So I think that would, well, nowhere, and also it doesn't say that it is.
Yeah.
So that, I think we did talk about that. I honestly do not recall that. But that might be something to add in here as a decision. Do we want to allow for these structures that don't conform? Do we want that to attach to the property, or do we have that individual? Because I think we get back into that same argument. Well, I bought this house and one of the features I liked was the carport. But I think that is something that this body needs to come to a consensus on, that we need to decide, do we want to allow transference, or does it stay permanently attached until they violate something?
Well, I think it should until they violate something. Or like you said before, you fix the road or the sidewalk to make it ADA, say it's 3 foot off, well, they can move it and fix that at that time. But if I have it on there and I sell the property tomorrow because they like the carport, well, they're gonna have to come back and get something done because it's not in conforming, because it's that way. So it should be transferable to the next owner. It's gonna be there and they're gonna know that's on there, but it should allow to go down the line.
If that is in the documents when they buy the house and all the processes go through, then let's say a house transfers ownership 2 or 3 times with that, and let's say that it does transfer with them, then there's never a reason for the current owner to be caught off guard when the backhoe comes in and tears down their 6 feet of their carport or whatever is in non-conformance. They would always be aware that they are in non-conformance, and that at such time that the city needs, or a municipality or utilities need to, that carport could come down. It's making them aware, which makes it very prudent to have this filing fee so that people down the road are protected. Right?
Yes, sir. And if they went about purchasing the property correctly by getting their title insurance and they get the title search done, because this would not just have the 907 Avenue somewhere. It would actually have the legal description, the lot, the block, the subdivision. So it would show up in a title search if they purchase that. So no, they would have that in there that, hey, you've got this non-conforming approval here. And I guess to even elaborate further, we wouldn't just show up with a backhoe to tear it down. The honest, no, in the event, let's say that on Avenue somewhere that there was a road construction project and they had this, okay, so the individual would be notified that saying, hey, this is the project start date, we would be given plenty, because there's a lot more, we just don't go out and build. It has to be designed, surveyed, this would be determined. At that point, they would be provided notice that, look, you have to, per this certificate or this approval, you have to comply with this. If they fail to comply, then yes, that's when the city would have to step in, but we would also use the court process to go through as well to make sure that they bring that structure into conformance. I would much rather see them modify that structure. It may be cheaper for them to just tear it down and rebuild. I don't know. But this would hopefully eliminate us having to remove the structure.
So I have a question for legal. On the conditional approval of non-conforming structures. So that means that they either violated a setback, probably they violated a setback 99% of the time. Are you going to write language in such a way that holds them culpable for that? Because at the end of the day, if we give a conditional approval from the city's perspective and an accident happens within the setback zones, we are just, the city's just as liable unless we make it crystal clear to them. Correct me where I'm wrong. If they're outside the property lines or if they're outside the setbacks and we give them a conditional approval, does that make the city responsible, partly responsible if something happens within those zones?
We have to take a look and see what the particular issue was. You know, if it was on a corner lot and you know, the issue with the fence, we send them notice and give them reasons why. And so I don't know how you could have a situation maybe where a setback would cause an accident.
Not cause, but damage or something happened inside with it. So car wreck rolls into something, rolls into a carport that is 20 feet instead of 25 feet. And the car stops, would have stopped before the 25 feet or 30 feet. And so now, and somebody dies.
Well, I guess
I'm playing the devil's advocate here.
Yeah,
I'm just sitting here from a commission, from our standpoint.
That, you know, the car would have stopped and no one would have been injured had that pole been back
Another 5 to 10 feet or
and
whatever.
So yeah, I mean, is it possible? It's possible. Is it likely? Probably not. So, you know, it's one of those things where you're in violation of a setback. Generally, those setbacks are put in because we're talking about zoning, and zoning has to do with the health and quality of life, those types of things, as opposed necessarily to a safety issue. So, I mean, I could see it happening, but if we got that, you know, concerned about every little thing we're doing, just letting them build a carport, it could fall over and kill some kids at a bus stop. And so, where do you?
Well, we still have that with some of these that we're, if we approve this, some of these that should not exist are going to continue to exist prior to 2014. I mean,
I think
after this time, and because we've changed our ordinance.
Right. I think what we're saying is
huge concerns
is
for me.
that you're not in compliance with one of our codes. We're not indemnifying you for anything that may happen because you're not in compliance. We're just saying, you know, as far as our code is concerned, you don't have to comply. And I think it'd be pretty difficult for a plaintiff's attorney to be able to bring the city in and say that you are partially responsible for the injuries that occurred because, you know, the carport stuck out 6 inches or 2 feet or, you know, something like that. So you could certainly tailor the language so that it identifies that we're giving you an exception. We're not taking any responsibility.
Right.
But the more you know, it's kind of like a list. The more, you know, it's as opposed to doing something generally. If you create a list and you leave something off, well, you're stuck.
I
If
agree.
you just do it generally.
General
you can always come back
indemnification.
at that time and try to argue, hey, all this stuff should be in the list. So we can
yeah.
take a look at it. It wouldn't be something that would, you know, concern me as far as somewhere down the road, you know, a pole not being in the right place, you know, because if that car rolls over, someone's getting hurt when it rolls over, whether it hits a pole or slides up to the front door, or, you know, I don't know.
So
We can certainly look at it.
the only other thing that I saw that I think needs to be added into some of the language is that, one, we're defining Like, if we go to 17.20.040, item B5, front yard must be a depth of at least 5 feet before reaching the area immediately below the roof of the carport. And you can find that in the other ones as well. But my concern is, I have a feeling that most of our residents think that their front yard starts at the back of the curb, which is not accurate. And their setback is not defined from the back of the curb, it's defined from their property line.
Okay, I see what, yeah.
And
So
so,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, really.
So my concern number one is that we clearly identify these from property lines, not from back of curb or sidewalk or whatever exists. That just because we maintain it doesn't necessarily mean it's ours. I mean, I maintain part of my right of way, but it's clearly the county's right of way. Or the cities, and so and that those areas should be defined where we have utilities in the way that they're clear of those utilities, or at least they understand that if they build within that utility easement, they're at risk. Because we have water lines that sometimes are in the road, we have water lines that are sometimes behind the back of the curb. Very seldom for the most places, but we have them. We have power lines, most of the time in the back of in the alleyways. In a few locations, we have gas in the roadway or behind the curb, but not often. But when those do occur, and their right-of-way extends into the landowner's property line, I think those clearances should be.
Would language like this, the yard, whether it's in side yard, front yard, the yard must be a depth of at least 5 feet from the property line, right of way, or easement before reaching the area immediately below the roof of the carport.
I think that would probably cover it.
I do agree. A lot of people do feel that it is their property line is at the curb, but we have addressed that. But
do you need to say that in the thing, that your property line's not at the curb, or not?
90% of the people that purchase a property, that go through a realtor, get an updated survey. It's not a true property survey, but it's a improvement survey. That's what we call it, and it identifies all of that.
Okay.
It's when I go buy a house or a piece of property from you and I pay you cash, and we never transfer documents other than we go down to the courthouse and change it over. Make sure the taxes are paid and we change the names. That's when stuff like that gets lost.
Okay.
And you know, that's the buyer's problem. When I choose to buy something that way, I take that risk.
So could you read that again?
The front yard must be a depth of at least 5 feet from the property line, right of way, or easement before reaching the area immediately below the roof of the carport.
No, because if you tell them property line or easement, they're gonna say, well, the easement's the curb out here, I'm just gonna measure from the curb. You have to tell them from the property line.
Whichever is greater or smaller. If you'll snapshot that for me, I'll get you I'll get a verbiage that'll fit for both. Because when I mean snapshot and send me your verbiage, I can get you one. But should say property line, and it should say easement, whichever one controls. But a version of that keeps your issue from coming up. And Patrick could probably write it for us right now, but
Yeah, you know, we could take a look at it and see if you want to send that in. I think incorporating that in.
those were the main things that I think that as we define this further, if we're gonna go through this process and change this. Those were my questions there, besides the fact that we now have to define economic conditions and quality of life. So,
I have a comment on
yes.
that. Do you have that picture that I sent you? Does that affect the quality of life if you're building, if you look at the two houses past that, you can't see them, you gotta come the other way. I think this is on Monroe. You have two very nice homes that people have spent a large quantity of money updating and everything else. And then this neighbor put in this recently. And so the person that's on the other side of it, there's a house between the two-story house and that carport. They can't see anything coming down the road whatsoever
Right.
because of that carport. So when we
Definite
say,
line of sight issue.
right, but it's also it's almost to the curb. But it doesn't mean there's no driveway or anything like that. It's not. It's just staked down with some rebar and welded up with sucker pipe and things like that. But they built that. I'm sure they have an expensive vehicle that they want to protect. I don't fault them for wanting to protect their vehicle. But by the same token, the quality of life for the people that have spent an enormous amount of money updating these homes, does that affect their quality of life? Because now part of their view is obstructed and they have a difficulty getting in and out. I mean, and this goes to A and B also. I mean, if you were in a commercial zone or something like that where large trucks were, that would make a perfect sense. But if you move to A or B because you want to have setbacks and you want to have front yards and all those kind of things, but someone is permitted to build this after we get done with this conformity, that we're going to allow structures that aren't attached and they don't have to look like the house and you can just build whatever you want as long as it meets the setbacks. If that were to meet the setbacks, are we going to say that's okay?
Clint, go ahead.
Well, my thing with that is if the neighbors don't complain, we shouldn't be deciding if it's quality of life issue. If the neighbors come and say, hey, we don't like that they built this thing, then I would feel personally that that's when we would get involved or whoever. But if the neighbors don't complain, that's not our business what's going on in that neighborhood, in my opinion. Whether I agree that it's nice or
homeowners
not.
association.
There's not an active homeowners association in the city limits.
I think that's kind of a neighborhood issue. Like, if you don't like it, you come and bring it and say, like, let's go.
Okay.
Right.
So then they bring it to us. We don't have any language to say you can't have
Well,
it. Then the people are
Have to
upset.
be taken back because it's too close to the deal. They would have to drop up 5 foot.
When was this, how new is this?
It's within this year.
So what you're saying is
So that
if the neighbor, say that neighbor that has their view obstructed, if they bring this
Issue.
issue to us.
And let's say that it is
we
in
need
conformance
language,
setbacks.
we need language
Yeah,
in here.
he has not a leg to stand on. He says, there's nothing that says I can't, so I will.
Well, number one, it's within the last 3 years. It was not permitted, I can guarantee you. Crystal did not permit that. The state did not approve it, so it doesn't have a state permit, and it sits inside the city's property, or the city's right-of-way. That thing's coming down.
Yeah.
I agree on the setback issues.
All
just
those
not as
rules,
far as
all those rules.
So if this
are
were,
already-
if they were to bring this to Crystal to get permitted,
There's no way that would have been permitted.
then it stops there.
Right.
Okay.
And the state never inspected it. If she takes the state inspector out there, the state's gonna go after the homeowner.
Okay. But let's go back, let's take it one more step further. It meets the setbacks, they bring it to Crystal, and they're gonna build a 14, 15, 16-foot structure to house their new $110,000 Denali that's got chrome rims and sits up and they have to climb up with a step ladder, okay?
Okay.
All right, so that parks in there, does that, but the homeowner next to it says, hey, I don't like that, that affects the ability for me to sell my home. Is that a factor? I'm asking the question.
So if it meets everything,
If it meets
And
the
they-
requirements, and Crystal says, yeah, you can build it, but I don't think your neighbors are gonna like it. But the neighbors don't have an opportunity to, because we're talking quality of life, and quality of life means not just the person who owns it, but the people that are around it.
So this right here deals with the non-conformance piece.
Right.
All right, so that's anything that's built from 2014 to now.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly this one is. If somebody was to come in right now,
Mm-hmm.
whether this was approved or not, say it's approved, so they don't have to connect it. They have to meet the setbacks. They have to meet all that. It also has to meet a set of construction standards that the state's going to require and the city's going to enforce. Okay? And so that particular structure built properly within setbacks would not be allowed either because of the way it was built.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not tied down properly. It doesn't have a construction. Wasn't done by a licensed contractor,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have a seal on it, so it's not going to be approved.
What's the seal?
Engineer seal.
Oh,
Because it's been. There's a difference between taking something that's pre-manufactured and putting it up.
mm-hmm.
Okay, that comes with its own set of design paperwork. Once you've taken that pre-manufactured object and adjusted it at any point in time, it's got to be redesigned.
Mm-hmm.
That one, based on the way you defined it, the sucker rod we lifted up and everything else was not redesigned,
Mm-hmm.
and probably wouldn't put up by a licensed contractor, or it wouldn't be staked in the ground on rebar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's my question. You know, when we approve this, are we approving structures like this as long as they meet the setbacks?
No, it doesn't keep people from building structures like that without our knowledge. It just means it's not approved.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, are we approving that? And so then, if there is a neighbor that has a complaint and it is built in conformance, does that affect their quality of life? Are we going to say that? Because that comes to the next question.
well, if it's in
What we're going
conformance,
to
it doesn't come to us.
It won't come to us, right?
Exactly.
Is that
If
what we're
it's
saying?
permitted and conforms and everything, it won't
Or
come
does
to
it come, I
us.
mean, does a complaint come to us, whether it's in conformance or not?
I'm talking about, does the homeowner that doesn't want
Does it
that?
like the neighbors properly? No, that's just too bad, so sad.
No, I'm just talking about what's our responsibilities? Where's our boundaries? We need to have those defined, because I don't want to have this discussion the next time someone comes up and says, I want to build this, blah, 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 and then we have to say, well, what do we consider quality of life? Do we have a consensus?
I didn't think we were permitting quality of life.
Well, that's what the language says in the thing. Quality of life, economic hardship.
So here's.
So, and it
think-
could be my ignorance, I don't know.
I think where you're taking this one is for new construction pieces.
Mm-hmm.
For new construction pieces that fall within the guidelines, which are the city ordinances,
Mm-hmm.
and meet the state construction requirements, we can't go any further with respect to telling somebody that's the next door neighbor that, no, you can't do that.
Okay, so then it really doesn't matter whether the next door neighbors, so when we're asking the next door neighbors at 100 feet both sides, are we asking their permission from 2014 to now? Or are we asking from 2014 prior? And I don't mean to be knob-headed, but
We're only time we'll talk to the neighbors, only time that we're gonna talk to the neighbors is if there's a non-conforming use or a variance or something at any point in time with what we deal with from the planning and zoning board.
so only in a non-conforming situation.
Non-conformings or variances or something like that. Now, variances aren't discussed in here, so that would be a separate issue that would come to us for something outside of Zone 8, because this addresses only Zone 8.
Or is that
That's the way
Correct.
Yeah,
That's the
so
way I
we
read it.
already has that one.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
if you recall,
year or two ago, we removed the requirement, or this body recommended, and the commission did approve the ordinance to remove the requirement in Zone B where it has to attach and conform.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
And we're gonna take it off the Zone A too, where it doesn't have to look like the house and doesn't have to be attached to the house.
so, but for any new construction, it does have to follow all the state rules. And so the state inspector's office is not gonna approve something that doesn't meet their guidelines from the building construction standpoint. So. And I would assume, Crystal, that the state building inspector requires things that they permit to be built by a licensed contractor, is that correct?
They would like it to happen that way, but it doesn't.
So,
A lot of these little metal carports pop up, somebody bought it from somebody and they just put it up and it's not permitted, it's not anything. And the state hardly has any recourse that they can do on that either.
what is our permit requirement for a carport?
That they get a state permit. But most of these metal ones that you see, they didn't get a city or a state permit.
Right, so going forward, as soon as passes and this becomes the new ordinance of the land in January or February of 2018, somebody puts up a metal carport, what are we gonna do?
What are you gonna do with the existing ones?
From 2014 forward, it would be
That's 3 years.
non-conforming conditional if it doesn't comply with setbacks. The new ones, what happens?
We can give them a citation for living without a permit. That's actually in our current code.
Right.
We can cite.
So what happens if they don't contact the state and get the permit? So,
The only thing we can do is give them a citation for not getting a permit.
okay.
I don't know where we're at, but I'd like to, just to say something, skip to the end real quick on that. Is there any way to leave out the language of jail for anybody? I mean, like the fines and all that, but I'm like really not into writing stuff that would put someone in jail, or because we got enough issues, but I guess I can agree with the
Our
fine.
ordinance have that in it existing. And then that is up to, when they get cited for something, that is actually up to the judge on whether she gives them jail time or just a citation.
But we are here today to talk about changing the ordinance, so I'm talking about leaving that out. Yeah, I know that it has it in it, but
I think from a
I mean, it just
logistics
doesn't
standpoint,
really matter for this.
it's not ever gonna happen. It is standard, but I can't tell you, you know, going through municipal court, and I can't say as far as how many violations we'll have to go through, you know, setting with district court, but, you know, the bottom line is that it costs the city so much to house somebody in a detention facility that generally the judge is gonna balance out the seriousness of the violation versus the cost. And if things are very serious, that they go through other forums as opposed to that, and so, you know.
So, could we actually eliminate the jail and just leave it as a monetary?
I mean, you could certainly eliminate it, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm all for it.
So how are we gonna word the jail?
Mercy at the courts, you know, mercy at the courts.
I mean, the courts, that's what they do. Is
At
they
discretion of the
review
court.
orders. Write it into our.
Well, but the court, it has to have its own set of guidelines as well. And so if the violation doesn't have potential in it, then can the court still do that?
It's gonna depend on a number of factors, and I think, the easiest way to look at it is that, what gets most people's attention to come through municipal court when we're talking about a code violation or weeds is money, dollars out of their pocket every day, every day, every day, every day. Because you would be surprised if someone says, I've been in jail before, throw me in jail. That happens. They don't care.
They feed you.
If they put up something that looks like that, the chances are
They don't care
that's
about
not
jail.
a deterrent for them. But if you start hitting them in their pocketbook, that is a deterrent. And so, you know, I look at it and say, I don't see the situation where we would ask for someone to be, you know, incarcerated for
Right.
something like this, because if there's something more serious, we're approaching it not from a planning and zoning or a zoning issue. There's some other issues that are out there. So,
You know, if that's the case, then maybe James, or staff, the right thing to put in there is a lien will be filed. And that at least gives the city some way to
well,
recapture their,
well, there are certain provisions for liens, and so just because, you know, somebody owes the city money doesn't mean that the city can go put a lien on their property. There's some limitations to that. And so I don't know if, you know, if what you're contemplating is if they're in violation, we would just file a lien.
not a simple violation.
You know, I mean, you can get to the jail time, I guess, on a contempt issue, kind of a roundabout way, but maybe I misunderstood what you anticipated as far as a lien.
Well, don't you have to continually reapply the lien after so many months or years?
Well, but you have to get it.
Like if you were a contractor and you didn't get paid and you wanted to get paid by the homeowner, you can put a lien against the property, but you have to maintain the legal status of it.
Well, the first thing we need to do is figure out how the city would have authority to put the lien on that property.
Right.
With a contractor, they would go under state law that talks about material lien and that kind of stuff.
Material liens.
And so with the city, we've got the ability to abate, let's say, weeds that are a public health threat to the neighborhood, not just a little bit of tall grass. And we can move forward, abate that nuisance because it's a public nuisance. It affects health and safety. Send the bill to the homeowner or that property owner, and if they don't pay, under those circumstances, we can place a lien. But we have statute that supports our position to do that, and city ordinance. And so I guess the question is, what are we contemplating as far as I mean, you can't just say, well, we fine them $25 a day, they haven't paid us, we're going to put a lien on the property, because that doesn't go.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
No.
But, you know, when we're talking, lien is a pretty broad term for most of us. We don't really know what entails in that situation.
Well,
and that's what I'm asking. But so we have the language that says that non-compliance produces, like the abatement, like the example you gave, and then at some point there is a lien put on it. Does that lien last indefinitely, or does it have to be does it require maintenance to keep it up? Or, you can forget about it in 3 years and be gone, and the homeowner still not have any consequence?
Generally what happens is that lien is updated on a regular basis, and it kicks in normally when a new property owner, because my experience has been people that let weeds grow 4 feet tall, they're not going to sweat that liens on their property. And so it's not until they sell that piece of property, and if they go through a title company where they look at title issues, that new owner is going to say, in order for, if you want $50,000 for the property, I'm going to knock off $472 because of this lien from the city for weeds. But what I'm saying is that's a completely different situation than what we have here. Right. And so if I don't know how we would get to a lien situation under these circumstances with a carport that is in non-compliance. I'm not aware of anything that gives us these.
So we really don't, other than citations, there is no other teeth to the code.
Well, you would say, hey, you're in violation. We're going to bring you in, see what the judge has to say. You've got so many days to comply. If not, you just keep moving forward against them.
So we could leave the fines and penalties and just take out the imprisonment. I'm just,
Yeah,
you know,
my
I'm like,
experience,
imprisonment for a carport.
my experience has been is that if you get fined 10, 15 times in a row and you're
That
not
money goes
compliant,
to your lunch.
the court may hold you in civil contempt, and there are some other rules about civil contempt that we don't have to put in here. But I've never seen that happen. I mean, I've been doing this for the city of Lovington since 2001, and I've never even seen anything come close to that. And remember, now you're talking about the imprisonment issue, jail time, and we had a set of rules, and we don't want to enforce those rules, but now we're talking about throwing someone in jail for violating new rules. And so you have to step back and take a look at the big picture and say, you know, what are we really trying to do?
And I guess that's my question is are we going to make rules and consequences that are enforceable, and let's go there instead of just making rules that are unenforceable or refused to enforce?
I'm not saying that the old rules are not enforceable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that I think that the concept right now that the city's considering is dealing with these issues of non-conforming uses. And so do you draw the line in the sand and say, hey, we had a set of rules, the fact that you didn't follow them, you're still not in compliance, or do we come up with some new ones? So the old ones are not unenforceable. I think, you know, new versions that I'm seeing here, those are enforceable also. Mm-hmm. It's just a different concept about every time you add a layer of, well, if it's before this date or after this date, or if it's a full moon year, or if it's a Wednesday, all those things tend to complicate how the people see it when they read it, because people are going to read this, and it complicates things as far as presenting a case in front of a judge. And so if a judge looks at it and he or she says, you know, this is kind of complicated, I've had legal training, how is John Q. Public supposed to understand this? And
so how can we make it more simple, fair, equitable, and practical?
Well, that's a large task, because simple doesn't necessarily mean it's fair and equitable. I mean, you could just go back and say, hey, we had a set of rules, and if you didn't follow those rules, too bad, it's time to pay the piper and move forward. That's the simplest way to do it. Simple. Is that fair and equitable? I don't know. It depends on what's fair and equitable. I think what's happening is you're taking a look at, and you're going to advise the city commission on, number one, how much support staff do we have to go enforce some of these? How much time do we want to spend on it? How much in legal fees do you want to spend on it? And really, what's the impact on this zoning issue as far as quality of life? And try to come up with something. Well, what I'm saying is, the simpler that you make it on your end, the easier it is for the public to understand. My job, and for a judge, if we ever have to get in front of a judge, to read it, and for he or she to say, this is plain, simple, John or Jane Q. Public can understand this. Let's go.
On the equitable part, I've been mulling this over for a long time. This is just my statement. I think that in doing this, I disagree with having to do this, and because it is not equitable. Because there have been people that have played by the rules, done what was required, paid the money, had the engineering, did whatever was required, and followed the guidelines and paid whatever was necessary and did the right thing. And now the other people that didn't do the right thing are getting a pass, and so one group of people were punished while the other are being rewarded. Now that's just a statement. That really bothers me that we're going to punish the people that did the right thing and reward the people who did the wrong thing. That said, there's no other way I can see around this other than what we're doing now. So most of this is, by my nature, disagreeable. okay? I don't want to put anybody in jail, but I don't like punishing people for having done the right thing. And they're suffering a consequence, and we're giving a pass to all these other individuals who chose not to do the work, but who decided not to do the work. You know, they chose not to, they decided not to, or they didn't care to. And they just did what they wanted to, and now we're going to say it's okay.
Okay, well, with that said, that's all fine if there's people that did right and people that did wrong, but what about the people that are innocent bystanders in that who, like my niece, for example, just bought a house,
that had it
has
on
a
there.
carport, well, now she loses because, you know, oh, well, you know, the people before you didn't do it right, so now you're losing your carport.
Well, that's what I said.
So you're still,
On the principle, I'm talking about principle.
right, but you're,
But now we're back to
but
practice.
she didn't do anything wrong. She's one of those that didn't do anything wrong. She
Yeah.
followed the rules.
Yeah, and so we're giving them an avenue to be able to
Continue to follow
continue
rules.
to get into compliance and rectify a problem. And that's why I don't think $150 is too much to get back into compliance and have everything worked out. I'm just telling you how I feel, okay? I just don't feel that it's right. I want us to follow our own rules, because that makes for a lot less confusion. And it keeps that, you know, well, you let so-and-so do it, why won't you let me do it? You have that problem. And if we have a set of rules that we're willing to abide by, and everybody play by the same rules, then we would eliminate a whole lot of confusion, and we all get along a lot better. But I just had to say my piece.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So has everybody figured out what they want to change in it or fix?
I agree with that. Personally, I'm not happy with a new ordinance that doesn't give you the ability to deal with certain types of structures. I think it's an incomplete ordinance, and I don't think that we took it far enough. If you don't have the ability to deal with somebody that puts one up that the state's not going to deal with, then I don't think that we've taken this thing far enough. That's my personal opinion.
Well, then I'd like to move to table the recommendation.
Which one?
Is there a way?
This is just for discussion, wasn't it?
This part's just for discussion. If we can come to an agreement on the way this thing gets written, then we can vote on it, or we can send it to the commission for them to review. Is there,
This is the discussion part.
yeah, is there a way to assist you in code enforcement with respect to specific to this ordinance, carports that the state's going to turn their back to? No, you care. I don't mean that in a negative. I don't care. I don't know if that's going to stand for me.
It is difficult because you've been talking and you'll have to go on to want to correct, but you're going to do fast for asking body code, and then you have to use them just don't care. And then we have, we really have no uniform ordinance.
Take the teeth in that.
Right now,
I mean, the code enforcement, because that's just once a year, and once a 2 years, or whatever. Too good time. It looks like we'll find issues when they're going through and looking at it. They may not find it the day after.
The teeth is in the violation clause. If you don't obey, these are the consequences. If you refuse to comply and you have to build something, it's coming down and you're gonna have the lien placed on your property. That's the teeth. It's the penalty for not following that code.
So I hear what you're saying. What I'm saying, specifically with like the metal carport picture that we showed, if that was built correct with setbacks and everything else, it's not going to get permitted by the state. It's not something the state looks at. So how do we put it in such a way that we can sit there and no.
Well, Mr. Chair, that's why I know at the joint session we had discussed that, you know, with the old structures, that's it. But with these new structures, they do have to have the building permit. If they don't have a building permit, they go ahead and they build the structure, they get cited to municipal or district court. That's where we already have those provisions in there. That they have to obtain they have to obtain the permit from us. They have to obtain the building permit from the state as well for any type of structure.
According to what I understand from Crystal, and I may understand wrong, I'm a little thick at times. The metal carports don't have to have a state inspector building permit.
It's only if they are over a certain, I can't remember for the life of me what it was. Over 120 square
12
foot.
by 10. Anything
Correct.
over bigger
Anything
than 12 by
larger,
10.
yes, sir. Anything larger than that is required to have that state building permit, and that's state law. That's not city code.
Including a metal carport that you buy from Amazon.com and they ship it to your house and you assemble it in an afternoon and it takes up 240 square feet. That has to be permitted. That's what we're saying. Okay.
It's supposed to,
Can we?
that's the ones that don't get permitted.
Can we encourage the community to permit it through us, and then can we somehow through the state be authorized by the state in this situation to permit carports and thereby eliminate one step and make it more conducive for people?
To answer your question, with a state building permit, those permits do have to be approved at the local level, and what we approve is do they conform with their zoning regulations. And then that gets sent to the state for their approval by their building inspector who issues that building permit. So, and that's why since 2014 we've had that better relationship with the state, because before they would just issue a building permit and the city would never see it. But now they actually work with Crystal to have those permits.
So they come through.
They do, yes, sir. They do come through the city.
Okay.
To make sure that what they're building, I mean, we do the legwork to make sure does this comply with our code.
Well,
So basically, what I hear, as long as it's larger than a 12 by 10, it goes through the process. If it's smaller than a 12 by 10, the only way we're going to catch that, a 12 by 10 or smaller, the only way we're going to catch that is through the drive-bys that the code enforcement does on whatever cycle.
do they make carports 12 by 10?
Okay. 10 by 10.
Well, can we not just go ahead and let that be a structure just like your shed in the backyard that you buy from Home Depot and put together yourself?
If it falls within the...
If it's 10 by 10, you don't have to get permits for it.
Yeah. No. But there again, you also have a problem, and I want to, if it's not properly fastened, it becomes a hazard to other people nearby. You know, if it gets blown over in our winds, because we do have the wind that can pick. I have seen that in Lubbock, where the carport's just tumbling because it was just staked down to a grassy lot. So we do need to have some way to make sure that those are properly fastened. Can we ask the public to, in those situations,
it's in there.
not for the less than 120 feet. I'm talking about for the 120 feet. I know for the larger ones, yes, you're correct. Is that something that we can fairly ask to make sure people don't end up with a tumbling carport?
Well, you're right back to the the same issue. The people who actually come in and talk to me about doing a carport, I make them get a state permit. The ones that just go out and buy one somewhere and put it up, they're doing it without permit. They've done it without my approval, without the state's approval. So, and we do have verbiage in Zone A of what the city could do if you build without a permit. But we don't have it, and I don't know haven't been here long enough to know if that verbiage reflects on B and C zones or if it's only for A, because it's only in the A zone.
It could have been a decision at that time as far as how to enforce, especially considering the number of violations you'd see in A versus B or C, but we can take a look at it and see.
So basically anything 12 by 10 and smaller, we're going to catch on whatever drive-bys we do, how often we do them, and the guidelines are going to be setbacks based on the new rules. Is that
Repeat that.
anything 12 by 10 and smaller?
They would, yes, they would
Would-
have to meet those setbacks still.
They would only, the only look that we'll be giving them is, do they fit the setbacks? Sorry,
Yes, sir.
I'll get it. Okay. So with everybody understanding that, is everybody good with that?
Only the setbacks, not any kind of security.
That's the only thing it'd fall under. That's the only thing that they have the ability to check for. Anything else would come after the damage is done.
But we leave the language in that, can we just put the language in to say that, okay, I haven't thought that through, so. Are we, in that situation, if something were to happen, are we somehow liable if someone's carport blows over and hits someone else's car next door? Because we didn't say you had to have it properly secured and fastened and we didn't inspect it. Is that an issue for us?
I doubt it.
Okay. Well, if it's not a liability issue for us, then we can let the neighbors duke it out.
Well, no, I'm not gonna duke it.
You want to bet?
Well, we can't let that happen.
You can't let that
We have
happen.
some other rules.
Well, I thought that's what planning and zoning was supposed to prevent.
So as we go through this, Paula's questions, do they affect prior to 2014? The answer is no. These rules are everything from that date, 2014 forward. Roof support per, this is the concrete ingress and egress.
That's been in the code.
Why on the concrete, why not asphalt?
It's just how it's been worded in the code. I don't know why the code was made that way, but it was made back in when it was the
I would
80s or
assume
the
be-
70s or something.
I would assume that's only actually addressed in the front.
In the front.
In the front. So that's the reason why, is because most drives are concrete in the front.
Right, okay. So it doesn't affect what a carport in the backyard?
I don't see it in the language in the carports in the back, do you? No, I'm wrong. Rear
Yeah, it says-
requirements in there in 4.
Number 4, must be assured by concrete driveway to width of the carport, and that's for rear yard requirements.
There are very few houses in town that would be just 2 trails of concrete too, so it does have to be modified to build that.
Oh, yeah, because there is some houses that just have the
The little runners.
little runner slabs in their driveway instead of the full
Full
concrete
concrete.
slabs.
Crystal, is the idea of having the concrete, is that so that the carport can be fastened to the concrete for protection? Or, is that a mechanical requirement?
Like I said, that code was written a long, I have no idea what their intention was with that.
Could we stipulate instead of the width of the carport or the width of the concrete drive that they're anchored with concrete approximately however many inches deep, so that you know that is that a viable solution to the problem?
If I may,
Okay.
if it's permitted.
That's what I mean, if it's permitted, you've got a large carport, they've done that, but they don't have a concrete driveway from side to side, and instead of making them put in a $16,000 or an $8,000 or $4,000 piece of concrete, can they drill post holes and then put anchors on it and then anchor the carport to it so that it's securely fastened?
Yeah, I would assume, and that's all I can do right now because I didn't write this ordinance. The word assured in this is another word for secure. So the intent was that
It's
secure.
If I can address the fact, as far as telling them to drill post holes, do all that, that is part of the state building permit process.
Mhm.
They will make sure that when they issue that building permit, that it's designed and anchored in a way that meets building code. That's.
And then so the
that's
inspector
something-
comes out and makes sure that it's done accordingly,
That's
right?
correct, yes.
Again, all that for anything greater than 120 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
But if, like I'm saying, say, I know over on, I think it's F and G and some of those houses, they have the two-strip
Yeah, two-strip driveway.
driveway instead of the complete concrete driveway. If you put a carport on it and get it anchored and yada yada, you're gonna have to pour more concrete.
I've never went to nobody and said you have to.
But that's what the code.
Yeah, that's what this is saying, is that you're gonna have to pour more concrete.
But there's a lot of those older houses that are that way, they have the two strips. But then the carport itself sits on a concrete slab.
But in your middle, it wouldn't sit on a concrete slab.
You'd have to pour concrete.
You'd have to pour concrete.
If it's just two strips, that's just for the car to drive on, not the carport.
Yeah.
So you'd have to pour more concrete. You can't attach it to the strips that are already there because it's not.
Not
Right.
wide enough,
Mm-hmm.
because they're what, raining construction
Like I
guys.
said, that was written before I was here. I don't understand why they did what they did. Because I think if you want to drive through mud to get to your carport, that's your business, but
Well, exactly.
that's what the code is, so why they did it that way, I don't know.
So, yeah, the way this is written is that it wants a concrete drive from the point that you exit the road to the time that you get into the, or to the end of to the carport. And if you drive through your carport, then it's concrete all the way.
And people building new carports right now are having to pour that concrete, because
Right.
that's here and that's what I'm making people do.
That might stop the $750 carport.
No?
When it costs $5,000
I wish it
to
would.
secure it. So that is the way the current code reads.
Okay.
Okay. Assessor's charges, I think James covered that.
Yeah, we did.
And I think
You covered the greenhouse.
I think he covered, yeah, I think he covered the part on your question on the non-conforming as well. So did I miss anything?
No, I think we got it all.
Okay, all right, so,
She has a question.
I do. We came in a little late. I'm sorry if I missed it. I just have a question on, I've been in contact with Denver here and there. I don't know if I missed the part. Mine's partially enclosed, but I bought it with my house that way. It's off to the side. Is that gonna make it non-compliant?
so,
Does
Come on.
It's on the side of my house, and it doesn't go past the length of my house, and I still have plenty of driveway before you hit the street, but it is enclosed. Because it's up against one part of my house, and then they enclose the other side of it.
It's not in front of your house, it's to the side.
It's to the side of my house. And the front and the back are still open, it's just the sides are not. But it doesn't
when
block
did you buy your
anybody's
house?
view. Huh?
When did you buy your house?
2008.
Just that-
So you'd be under the
Yeah.
what are we calling this?
The not touching.
As I understand what we're looking at today, you purchased that in 2008 that way. That's a condition that's not addressed and won't be addressed.
Okay. Okay, that was my question.
Correct, James?
But doesn't that make it a garage?
2008?
It's not a carport. Carport does not have walls. That has a wall. I don't know, honestly, I don't think that we can give you a good answer without actually looking at it and reading through our code. I would recommend that you get with Crystal, just so we can get that question answered, but I couldn't give you an answer.
Well, I guess technically only one wall, because the other part is just up against my house. There's nothing on that side to my knowledge, just the one side.
What was your name?
So,
Cassie Pratt, it's the one on Main Street.
Oh, okay.
So what if you took the metal off that was enclosed, but not all the way down?
That would have to be a carport.
That would satisfy the carport, having the open ends, because if it's open on both sides, it just happens to be up next to a wall on another structure. And I don't think and the reason that the walls are there is so that it doesn't, we say no walls is so you can have visual, you can see through it, right? Is that it?
no,
Or it's just that's the definition of a carport?
yeah.
Okay.
I think each one of those would have to be looked to see if it falls under the definition of a carport or a garage.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, we have some adjustments that we've talked about, property lines and the utilities. We've talked about removing gel pipe, and I think those are the only major corrections, unless somebody wants to deal with or has an issue with the terminology of the concrete.
Yeah, but can we change that? James, it's been ever since it's
All
older
of this
than
has
dirt.
been here forever.
It's older than dirt.
We can pretty much change, this would be the opportunity, if we do want to see that changed. This would be the time to consider it. I know that we have not discussed that previously. I don't know what the feelings of the city commission would be either, but if that's something that if that's something that this body feels that needs to be changed, we can include that with our recommendations as well.
What citation is that for the concrete?
It would be in the, it'll be in front yard requirements and rear yard requirements. Front yard, 1720.040B 4, sorry, and rear yard 1720.060 number 4.
040 and 060? Oh, number 4, okay.
And on side yards, number 40. Nope.
Randy, she's got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one more question. I know you guys were discussing when you bought the house, if people do it right, they would be aware of certain things. But I don't know if you remember, I'm pretty sure it was you, Randy, when I came the very first time. In my house paperwork, when they went and looked at my house and gave me the estimate and everything of how much it was worth, my house said it was in zoning compliance, everything.
Right.
And I remember you said you were going to go ask about that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too. I had a question for if other people buy a house and it says they're in zoning compliance.
Yeah,
Because that's why if I took the house, I assumed it was okay.
So to answer your question on that,
Mm-hmm.
the guy that was in your appraisal documents, and we have no control over what those guys do.
It's just a realtor trick.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a little
like,
box
for the
that they
people who
check.
get it before, after though, like what if they assume they're in zoning, like how are we supposed to know if they say yes and it's not?
I agree, and I wish I could do something about that, but there is absolutely. I've talked to the appraiser, the people that certify the appraisals. Why the heck is that box there? And it's just a box they check. That's the answer I got.
Okay, that was my only other question, because I was
Yeah.
like, that's the only
And I
reason I thought
understand,
the
I
carport was
understand,
okay.
you're told
said it
that,
was.
that you understand it's in compliance,
Mhm.
so, I wish I had an answer for you on that. I don't.
Well, and that's what you're paying a realtor and all these people for, is so that they're checking the
And
legal
make sure you're in
documents.
compliance, yes.
So, but the thing is that if you find out that it's not, then the issue is between you and them, is that you say, look, you didn't do what you said you were supposed to do, and it's like, and here we go. Now we got people bickering back and forth because we don't have that. But that becomes an issue between you and the people that you purchased it from, or through the agency, because they didn't do their job.
He misled you.
They didn't go through and read the documents, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing the compliance documents, is so that in situations like this, they come in, they see it, and they know, and then you know, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to amend or
That was
correct.
one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just because, I mean, I can't afford to
Oh, I
take
understand.
it down.
I understand. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to work this out. It's making sausage. It's an ugly process.
So we can change it and add asphalt, gravel, or cliche in the carport? Because if it can, you know, you have to have concrete right back inside, it's a lot of concrete. You know, if they want dirt.
Well, but now we're back to the assured
If it's
fastening. You can't assuredly fasten it.
Permit,
Yeah.
it could be a pole barn,
Yeah.
and it still meet building permit.
I'm sorry, what'd you say,
It
Ron?
could be a pole barn and meet building permit and have a dirt floor.
Yeah, well, as long as they have that assured fastening is the issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they meet the state building permit,
It can be poles, concreted.
I don't think that's the case anymore, is
Yeah, it can still be done.
they still build pole buildings.
Pole buildings with concrete bases. And nothing in the middle but dirt.
But they're legal.
Yes.
Well, all I'm saying is that if you take out the way it's written right now, if you take the concrete out, then
Now,
you
can
have
leave
nothing.
concrete, but add the other to it.
Well, just let me finish here, Betty. What I'm saying is that you still need to have a language in there that it's assured and fastened to something secure.
It does have.
If
You
you
gotta
take
get
the-
it permitted.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just
Well,
saying.
that
That
assures-
permit makes it assured that it's in there and secure. A concrete driveway ain't gonna make it assured.
Well, the way I was reading the thing was to say that that's how they were assuring it, was to fasten it to the concrete with some type of anchor.
It would almost have to be two separate items. One, make sure it's assured, fastened, and then the other one, if we would want it to have a driveway, it seems like
You wouldn't have
there's two
to, you wouldn't have to have a stipulation for a driveway. It could be whatever you want, dirt, caliche, gravel, mud.
Well, I think, well, we have three approaches. One, we can table this, and you guys can come back with suggested writing for concrete. Two, we can vote for the changes, each set of changes independently, and see which ones make it into the final and which ones don't. Or four, approve it as written. Three. Good, I skipped it. Okay.
Oh, you got that?
Yeah, I got it. It's been a long week.
You can skip 3 if you want.
Yeah. I'm an Aggie.
Can I say one more thing before
Yes,
we
ma'am.
read it? I think we're overthinking it.
you're not going to be able to do every single solitary thing. It's like opening a can of worms. You gotta do a broad whatever and stick to that. Otherwise, we're already nitpicking about strip concrete, and it just, at some point, you just have to kind of hit the high spots. And I don't know what you're gonna do about permits, other than take them to court. But you're getting into too much detail. You know, with your wanting everything to be fair for everybody. Life is not fair, I'm sorry. And you're just gonna have to do what you can to try to get this situation in hand and move forward. But I don't think you can fix it all.
I think James scared us when he said we have to get it right before they mail everything out. Words are powerful.
Well, can we, let's do this. Can we agree to take out the language of imprisonment?
Yes, that works. And
then we will have a sense of accomplishment. Okay? And then that will give direction for James and them.
I have a motion on the floor to take out the language imprisonments out of section 17.40.080. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
The rest of the violation stipulations, all the penalties stand as is, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Was there anything else that you had noted as far as changes?
Well, we have the changes that from the document that we have to James with respect to defining commission and the duties. So I think
I think we're doing something wrong.
why?
They
I was
discussed.
gonna say, I think we're still on non-action items.
I moved.
He doesn't judge.
So do I need to make a motion that we move to action items, or is that just something that progresses naturally?
No, it's gotta be, that non-conforming structures or land uses, if that's what we're talking about. It had, you know, tonight's a discussion on that.
So we don't need
And
to.
so we're contemplating, at a minimum, unless somebody tables it and it never comes back, which I'm not saying would necessarily make anybody cry, right? But we're in a non-action item, so you can talk about what you want to see and
Change.
direction and that kind of stuff. But as far as a formal moving,
We
Yeah,
don't
we
have to do
have
that?
to vote.
Okay. So, but we would still like to see that, another document with that language taken
I
out.
think that's a general consensus.
Okay. All right.
All right, we're on to jail.
So
Gone. What else did we vote?
so that being said, in the non-action, we can discuss the changes that we want to make. We can open the action items up. We can make those changes and then approve, or no.
No, if it's just for discussion, there's no action to be taken.
Right, but the next step on our agenda is an action item.
And you got a table.
Yeah.
And then you're saying we would have to table it and repost the changes, the suggested changes? Or can we not approve the suggested changes under the action item?
If part of that's listed on the action item and it's brought back up under anything on the action item, you can go through the process of somebody moving a second and see if it passes with a vote.
Specifically, can we address each of the issues with move out of non-discussion or just non-action items, move into action items, talk about the specific items,
And change it.
and make the changes, and then approve it, or not approve it tonight?
I mean, if it's part of 17.2A or 17.20A, 17.40 non-conforming uses, then you can.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the intent was for us to discuss this. We can make changes to this, and then if everybody seems to be satisfied, you can move into the action items and approve this, a recommendation to send this to commission.
So we can
With those-
edit it in the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can edit it.
And then, for instance, if, you know, there's something you can go through and not everybody agrees, and if it's just that one component, or one point, if it does go to a motion to vote, I mean, you can still vote no if you don't agree with, even if it's that one particular component. But that's what the discussion is that we can make those changes in discussion, and then we can have a draft item. I honestly don't think we're gonna get there tonight, because I think wheels are turning. There's some other areas. My recommendation is that you would table that action item tonight.
Okay.
Because we don't know the exact language as well, as far as the point you brought up with the 5 foot from the roof line. We still haven't even hit the point on, I think I know the general direction that everybody would like, but does this transfer to a property owner? We can put language in there for that, you know. So do we, I don't think that we're gonna solve the issue with the whole assured by concrete tonight.
Okay.
So we've had plenty of discussion, we can now go
Well,
to
we
the
have
action
to-
item and table it.
Table.
It's your
Okay.
discretion.
And table it till the next meeting.
So is there any other discussion points from any of the commission members? If not, then I would like to move on to non-action item, or to action item.
Get
Have
off
one of those days.
I make a motion that we table the action item of considering recommendations of the ordinance until our next meeting.
Second.
Is that good?
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just for clarification, so we're going to direct them to come back with different language on those 3 items that James identified.
I think we have more than 3.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
the other concrete, we have the jail term.
Yeah, but it's going to come back with the consensus that we've come to.
Right, right.
Yes.
Okay, that, all right.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. I make a motion we adjourn this meeting.
I second.
Carries. Hold on. Did we skip an action item?
No, we didn't.
Skip anything.
Yes.
Other
Other
comments?
comments.
There's no more comments, right?
If there's no other comments, a motion to adjourn, please.
Everybody wants to get in.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.